Oh, hello there. My name is Pastways, Inspector Elliott Pastways of the Yard. Now, I was asked to come to you today to talk about something near and dear to my heart, the Interurban. The Interurban was electric mass transportation as it existed in southeast Michigan 100 years ago. We're going to take a journey up Orchard Lake Road into West Bloomfield Township. So join me, won't you? We'll have a wonderful journey. Now, before we start our journey, a little background history is in order. It's no coincidence that mass transportation ended up here in southeast Michigan because there were three major Native American trails that crisscrossed this area. The first of the three trails is the Grand River Trail. It went from the Detroit River all the way across the state to Lake Michigan. The second trail was the Shiawassee Trail, and it also led from the Detroit River, but it went further north and ended up in Lake Michigan as well. The third of the three trails went north up from what is today Ohio and ended up in Orchard Lake. It's called the Orchard Lake Trail. Now, these Native American trails were very important so that settlers or new pioneers coming into the area could find their way to their property. Now, those Native American trails turned into pathways, and those pathways turned into roadways. And of course, they were dirt roadways that connected farm to farm and village to village. Now, if you add one component to the dirt roads, water, you had a muddy mess. So road conditions were very poor in southeast Michigan. In 1850, the Plank Road Act was passed. That allowed private industries to lay boards over the roads. To use these improved roads, you would pay a penny a mile if you were on foot. You paid 2 cents a mile if you were on horseback, or you'd pay 3 cents a mile if you were in a horse-drawn cart. Some of the improved roads in this area was the Detroit and Howell Plank Road. Here's an example of a toll booth that was located near Botsford Inn. Here's another example of a toll gate. It was on the Orchard Lake Gravel Road. This is an improved road, and that toll gate existed on Orchard Lake Road where Pontiac Trail veers off to the west. Someone came up with a brilliant idea of using train tracks and putting a small trolley on the train tracks. Now, these small trolleys were pulled by horses, and they were called horse cars. Now, this was a temporary solution because you had to consider that the horses can't pull very heavy loads, can't pull them long distances, and then of course you have the care and feeding of the animals and veterinary bills, and what are you going to do with all that manure? An inventor right here in the Detroit area, a man by the name of Mr. Charles Vanderpool, came up with an idea, putting an electric motor inside the trolley, running a wire overhead above the tracks with a trolley pole that touches the wire, and then the steel track touching the steel wheels would complete the electrical circuit. This was an electrifying idea. Now, back in the 1890s, if you wanted to run tracks in a municipality, you had to get permission. That permission came as part of a franchise. Back in the late 1890s, there was a need to run the tracks from downtown Detroit all the way out to Pontiac. Two men, Strathern Henry and his father George, had put in to run the tracks from the city limits of Detroit all the way to Pontiac. There were two other men that were brother-in-laws, Voigt and Randall. They wanted to do the same thing. Unfortunately, they were beat out by Strathern Hendry and his father. So as not to be outdone, they discovered an alternate route to Pontiac. You see, what they did was they combined forces with Colonel Seymour Brownell, who owned the Grand River Electric Railway that ran from downtown Detroit all the way to the village of Sand Hill. Today, Sand Hill is known as Redford. So they combined forces with him and continued the track all the way to Orchard Lake Road in Farmington Township. In 1901, the Everett Moore Syndicate out of Cleveland, led by Jera Hutchins, came along and purchased all 30 independent street rail companies in southeast Michigan. This unification became the new corporation called the Detroit United Railway, otherwise known as the DUR. So now, let's take a small journey, and we'll start at what was known as Farmington Junction. A junction is a place where track either comes together or comes apart. Well, hopefully it didn't come apart while there was a trolley on it. As you can see by this photograph, the dirt road that leads out into the distance is Grand River. And you see the trolley track as it curves to the right of the picture? That's leading on to Orchard Lake Road. This was called Farmington Junction. Located at Farmington Junction was this waiting room. Behind the waiting room was the powerhouse. Trolley companies produced their own electricity. It took 600 volts of power to power one trolley down the tracks. If you look to the right side of the photograph, that long building is called a car barn. A car barn is the place where they would repair the trolley cars and store them. Trolley companies usually negotiated with farmers so that they could run their track on the farmer's property instead of running it in the road. They actually gave the farmer $1 so they could purchase the land, and if the farmer was a shrewd businessman, he would accept that $1 and expect them to build a platform on his property. So when it was his turn to go to town, and if he wanted to take the Interurban, all he would have to do is hop onto the platform on his property, and when the trolley came by, it would stop and pick him up, and away he went. Here's a shelter that the farmer that owned that property was shrewd enough. He got more than just a platform. He requested a shelter so he could get out of the elements. This shelter was located at Walnut Lake Road and Orchard Lake Road. This is a view of Orchard Lake Road as it appeared 100 years ago. You can clearly see the trolley track, and you're looking north up Orchard Lake Road at Walnut Lake Road. Now you can see on this map that there's heavy rail, which was the Michigan Airline Railway, and the trolley track came up to meet it. Unfortunately, the railroad commissioner at that time said, you cannot cross heavy rail at grade. You either have to go over the track with a bridge or under the track with a tunnel. Oh, hello again. Inspector Pastways here, Inspector Elliott Pastways of the Yard. Now behind me is Orchard Lake Road. Pictured here is an Interurban car. This car has a number of different stops on it, including Oak Grove. That's just across the street. We're going to check it out. As the trolley track was getting closer to what is today St. Mary's Preparatory School, Voight and Randall built a bridge. That bridge elevated the interurban line over the railroad track. As you can see in this photograph, these cadets were having artillery practice, but that's not the focus of this photo. If you look behind them, you will see two trolley cars. One of them's in the Y, the other one is on the main line. The interurban station in this photograph was struck by lightning in 1912. So by 1913, the Detroit United Railway built this waiting room. Inspector Pastways again. Here we are on Seminary Road. Now take a look at this photograph of what it looked like 100 years ago. There was the Auto Stop Inn. That was like a 7-Eleven way back then. And notice down the street is the Pine Lake Marina, still with us today. Inspector Pastways again. Here at the Orchard Lake stop is a wonderful marker that talks all about this particular location. Now here we are just north of the Seminary Road stop. As we head north, now we find ourselves onto Cass Lake Road. But back then, it was referred to as Spruce Street. Now here's evidence of the trolley track. This northern boundary of this parking lot actually is curved because it follows the right-of-way of the Detroit United Railway. Inspector Pastways again. Now I'm at the location of the Sylvan Lake Community Center. The Sylvan Lake Inn once stood in this location, built by this man, Mr. Merrill Mills. He built a trolley line called the Pontiac and Sylvan Lake Railway to get people from Pontiac to his beautiful resort. Unfortunately, in 1903, the wooden structure burned to the ground. Well, as the sign says, this is where the road ends. Our journey ends here, because here on Garland Avenue, Garland went across the way over to Telegraph Road, crossed over Telegraph Road, and then went on to Huron Street, where it wound its way down into Pontiac. So thank you for joining us. We had a wonderful journey. Pip, pip.
Action.
Inspector Pastways again.
Thank you for watching. Please support Greater West Bloomfield Historical Society efforts at gwbhs.org. Thank you.